I'm assuming that is working. Okay, so who are we? My name's Lorna Brown. I am a Tableau Zen Master and Tableau Public Ambassador. I used to be Lorna Eden. I got married just before the lockdown. And you can find me at _Lorna_Brown. And I'm a consultant at the Information Lab. Colin?
Cool. Thanks, Lorna. So I'm Colin Vojtovic, a freelance consultant based in Chester. Been using Tableau for 3 years, and in lockdown, I'm all concentrating on my training with Tableau. So I don't know if you're aware, but they've recently opened up their e-learning platform, and I've seen lots of people on LinkedIn getting their badges. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on next. Also, lots of storytelling with data challenges from Cole, Nussbaum, and Affleck. So that's going to be keeping me busy in lockdown.
Cool. Ella?
Hi, I'm Ella Worsdale. I'm a head of information for the NHS Pennine Care. I'll be talking later a bit about what I do, so I won't go on too much. But I'm also a Tableau user group ambassador and firmly obsessed with Tableau, hence why I'm here.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So here's our agenda today. We have arrivals and networking, and then just a bit of a welcome from us guys. First up, we have Zen Master Ravi Mistry, and he's going to be talking about Nudge, where behavioural design meets data viz. Then we have Jenny Martin from the Information Lab's Data School, and she'll be talking about cleaning data in a few clicks with Tableau Prep. Once she's finished, we'll go back to the tables and we'll have a little bit more of a chat with our tables and do a little bit of networking. And then at 2:30, we have Ella Worsdale, and she'll be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on NHS data people. And then finally, we can either stay on, answer some questions, or we can go back to the tables and have a chat. And if not, you'll feel free to leave at that point. So without further ado, I'm just going to stop sharing, and I'm going to invite Ravi up to the stage because he has his hand up. So I'm going to bring him to the stage. So everybody, this is Ravi.
Hey, everyone.
And he's going to be doing his presentation. So over to you, Ravi, when you're ready.
Excellent. I'm just going to quickly share my screen, so let me know when you can see it. I'm also going to turn my camera off for this because I know that Remo has that sort of dual section. So I'm going to turn that off and see if that helps to make my screen bigger. There's a top right corner. I think that doesn't help because you still see my face. So you click on the top right corner on your screens to make me full screen. And here we go. So as Lorna said,
sharing your screen, Ravi?
Is it sharing?
Not yet. No.
Not. Let's try that again. Is it working?
No.
Okay. Bear with me. I'm probably going to need to hop off and change browser because it's doing the stupid Mac thing. Sorry, bear with me.
Okay, 2 seconds. I will fill.
Thank you.
Okay, so Ravi will be back in a moment. If you have any questions, then please ask them in the Q&A. No, you're not supposed to be able to see a black screen. You're supposed to be able to see my face. I'm sorry, it might break your screen, but you should be hopefully being able to see. Now you should be able to see me, Ravi, and his screen. I'm turning myself off so people can then just focus on Ravi. So over to you, Ravi.
Cheers, thank you. Apologies for that technical hitch. Where would we be in a remote world without a small technical hitch or checking if someone's microphone's on or the video is on or something like that? As Lorna said, my name is Ravi, and I'm going to talk to you today about Nudge and sort of walk you through where I see two things that I'm really passionate about sort of intersecting. So, I'd like to start off by taking myself back to year 9 geography. So in my high school, I grew up in Ipswich. We had, in year 9 geography, was the first lesson, I think, ever that we'd been told, on the first day of term, start of the school year, go sit wherever you want. And what we did is obviously you find your mates, you sit with them, two per table. And then what happened is the week after that, everyone sat in the same place in that classroom. And the week after that, the same thing. And the second someone sort of moved and changed, it sort of upset the rhythm. And I think that was really interesting. And I remember speaking to for a few years on about the habits we form, and the fact that from school you've always had set places to sit just to have some order amongst the chaos. But in this realm of find wherever, you always seem to settle in one place. And the reason for that is, as human beings, we're all creatures of habit, right? We have the same routines, we have the same sort of commutes, well, not so much anymore, but we have the same sort of systems we follow, right? We get up, we do these things, we are like to have the comfort of exactly the things we do, right? And we know that tried and trusted methods work, so why would we change and deviate from them? So the reason for this, there's a bunch of research done into exactly why we do this, why we have habits, and the way to form a habit follows this CAR model, right? So when you're trying to form a habit, what you should do is actually continue to exercise this, where there's a cue, you do an action, and then you get a reward of some sort as a return. Maybe that's just the altruistic feeling of, hey, I've done something right. But this is the sort of format we follow. These habits that we form are just normal. We just understand them. But why we like this, right? We're creatures of habit. We like the things that are familiar to us. But what is the actual reason behind this? Well, it actually comes back to sort of the way our mind works, right? There's a hindbrain and the amygdala, are parts of the brain which control instinct, so long-term memory and short-term memory. And because of this, it sort of gives us sort of the comfort that what we're doing is correct and safe, because we're able to recall and sort of understand what the risks and rewards are of these things we're going to do. Now, what's interesting is the part of your brain that is the frontal cortex is the bit that sort of does the problem solving, recall, and control of impulses. And this is the part where we can start training and changing the way we think and the habits that we form. So really what I'm talking about is all of these things are about how we make choices. The behavioral side of the way we exist is about how we actually choose choices and make those decisions based on previous information, current information, and perhaps even future prediction. So I studied economics at university. I went to the University of Plymouth. And the reason I did that was that there were really three key reasons. One, economics seemed interesting-ish, like I enjoyed it at A-level. Two, it was a broad subject to study, and there was like some levels of interest in like the way the world works around you. And the three, and probably the most important reason why I studied economics is, well, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And choosing something that was so broad meant that I was able to sort of dig into something and get my teeth into something that had a lot of open doors, and I didn't have to choose really early on like you would with, for example, a degree like law or, I don't know, veterinary sciences. But what does this actually mean? Well, economics being a study of rational choice under scarcity. Well, the world we live in has scarce resources, and we as agents, as the economics term goes, as people, as agents, whatever you want to call it, we have to make these choices based on scarcity, right? Scarcity of information, scarcity of objects, scarcity of items. And it's assumed that we make rational choices. Now, everyone in this meeting, perhaps we don't make rational choices, but the sort of information flow we do go through goes a bit like this. Like we have desires, we have beliefs, we take actions based on information, and there's this sort of weird iterative loop process that goes on when we do things. So really, in the world that we live in, which was filled with data and filled with information, we are in the era of behavior, right? So things that we do and the sort of things that influence us to change our minds and the understanding we have of the world around us almost lends itself to this behavioral thinking, right? The era of nudge, as it were. But old economics maybe is wrong. So like there's a lot of theories in economics and not so much as what's the word, fact in some cases, because it's always based on models and scenarios. Because we're not really rational, right? There's a theory of boundary rationality that every single person is rational. We think and approach things with the same mindset and are always looking for an optimal solution. When actually sometimes we do really irrational things, right? It's like having that final drink when you really should go home, or making that phone call that you really shouldn't, and things like this, right? We don't make so many rational choices because we are also emotional creatures. So everything boils down to this choice, right? What are the reasons we make these choices? And when I studied economics, my dissertation was on behavioral economics, because I was very interested in this part of it. And my dissertation was based on why do we recycle, and I'm really focusing on students. And the TLDR, the too long didn't read version of this this thing I wrote was, we make choices because we're sort of pointed in that direction. So in the bottom right here, you can see the 3-bin system that we've all come to know and love, where you have the choice of putting the thing in your hand, the item of rubbish, into the correct point. Either it's trash, or you can recycle it as paper, recycle it as plastic, right? We are given these 3 choices. And ultimately, in my study, I found exactly this. Like, we don't make the choices. There are only a few of us make choices to recycle based on some level of responsibility. Everyone else just does it because it's convenient and it's easy. And this actually is translated into design, right? So we have the concept of behavioral design. And there's this book called The Design of Everyday Things that was recommended to me by a friend. And within this, it talks about how do we end up with the designs of the things we have around us, right? Like, if you remember like phones at the beginning were massive and bulky, now we've just got a massive screen, right? With the phones sort of got smaller and then they suddenly started getting bigger again. Like, that's one example. Computers are the same, started off getting bigger and then now they're either compact. And most people actually now have laptops because it's convenient. One example that I really like within this is the humble urinal. So there's a study, I think it's somewhere in Europe, this bar or whatever, they put flies on urinals because men are famously liberal with their aim when in the bathroom, especially during pub sessions or nights out. But adding this fly, some pubs have even put a ball with a goal in it. It gave someone a target, and that small nudge to say, "Hey, hit the fly," even though it's not actually a fly, it's just a spot, helped people aim and sort of reduce cleaning, right? Now, I'm not saying that we should add flies to our toilets at home, but what I am saying is what we can use is these sorts of nudges to get desired outcomes, right? We can push people in the direction of an outcome that we're going for that can be used for good, evil, or just to make things easier to understand. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, sort of the why and the how, and ultimately I'm going to talk about 3 concepts. So around this, we're going to talk about like framing, like exactly what are the sort of alternatives, because every single one of these examples, there is an alternative, and sort of all of this is around the sort of framing we go for. So in this case, you can compare the politicization of a bill versus, improve our schools. That's great. Or we raise our taxes. Well, they're the same thing, but one is marketed differently. 25% fat or 75% fat free. Again, these are all marketing terms and things we can do to reframe the information that we're being exposed to. But really, we accept the information we think we deserve to sort of warp a phrase from John Green. We really understand what we're given in front of us. If we're not given the correct information in the right format, we don't really, we sort of then start referring back to our own experiences, bounded rationality, etc., to make the decisions, right? This assistance can really help here. So, but we're here to talk about Tableau, data viz, not really economics and sort of high-level theories about behavioral design. So let's bring it back. And I'm going to start off by talking about the little of data viz, so the first of my 3 key topics. Then I'm going to talk about data and viz literacy and sort of that baseline thing that we all seem to understand. And finally, a couple of modes of nudging to help you move in the right direction. So let's start off with the small parts of data viz. So sorting is a great one. So I'm just going to hop out of presentation mode here and then move to my next slide. So for example, here is a humble line chart. So we can see here, that you've got sales going from 470 all the way up to 733. This is great. The last 4 years have been fantastic. However, if you're diligent enough, you may have noticed the years are in the wrong order for whatever reason. But if you're not aware of how to look and sort of understand and have that basic knowledge of, well, this is how a visualization should be looking, or where you check the axes before you read a viz, most people will just look at a line chart and be like, trend good, sales up, right, in this really Neanderthal way. But ultimately, if we actually do sort this correctly, well, it does show a similar picture, but perhaps in a different light, that there was a more of a significant drop-off between 2015 and 16. So obviously being aware of exactly what you're looking at and having that understanding, small tweaks that you can just make sure that you're doing, and making sure that we as designers are being responsible about the information we're showing to our end users. This really comes into tacit knowledge. So tacit knowledge is a concept that everyone has a assumed knowledge. This is basically common sense it's a fancy way of saying common sense. So tacit knowledge being this thing where we know things, but we just assume that everyone else has that base level of understanding. This is why bar charts work so well, right? We understand bar charts really simply. So the fact that you can see the different colors here, really quickly easy to distinguish. You can tell me that the consumer is the highest and home office is the lowest. Great. Bar charts are boring, but the reason they're boring is because they work, they're easy to understand. And we're taught this from a young age within schools to understand exactly what a bar chart is telling us when sorted correctly. And this is actually why pie charts work, because ultimately, if the message you're sending is that I want to look at a proportion of a whole number, well, then I can easily tell you that the consumer segment here, this blue segment, is giving me the highest number of sales. So we're tapping into that basic, keeping it simple understanding of everyone understands the bar chart. What I'm trying to convey is that consumer goods are the highest. So let me highlight this. And you can use different aspects of data viz to tell this story as well. But this is another example of tacit knowledge. And similarly, and for size, like I might not be able to compare the sort of difference between consumer and home office, but if the thing I'm trying to convey, the thing I'm trying to communicate to my end user is that this is the biggest, this is the smallest, and this is the relative size, then a bubble chart works. And there's a lot of heated discussion in the data viz community about bubble charts and the use of them. But in some cases, yeah, they work. They can tell you at a glance the sort of relative size, and they work as a nice visual cue. So the list of data viz is actually a phrase I've stolen from the other AK in my life, Andy Kirk. So Andy Kirk has this great series. I'm just going to quickly hop across and show that web page. So we can see here, there's 29 parts to this series. This is one example of his blog post where he talks about the Financial Times. If we click into this image, it will take us to exactly where this chart was shown. If we scroll down, where it's calling out all these different parts of the UK. If you hop back a second. So we're using highlighting and small little elements, little blocks of color. We can sort of start being able to call things out. And this is an entire series done by Andy. And there's over 40, 50 of these, which is just fantastic. Just to think of the small prompts and small nudges you can follow to understand this. So if I hop across to the next section, let's talk about the FT death charts guy who's found fame in this time. So John Murdoch works for the Financial Times as part of the Financial Times data team, probably the place most people go to find out information visually about our favorite pandemic. And he does this fantastically, right? So within the charts that he tweets and shares, and within the articles that the Financial Times are reporting, the sort of small elements, and I want to call out these three, the sort of adding the line chart as a key within the text, as little elements and shading to understand exactly what's going on without taking up real estate on your visualization. So imagine if this was a legend on the right-hand side, or just like a thing, that pop-up icon, which had you click, but integrating into the information and the text that's showing really just integrates it in a way that's not only easy to follow and understand, but also doesn't take up valuable real estate on the visualization page. And most of the page is filled up by information which is relevant to most people. Okay, and I know, and speaking to John, like it's a really good understanding of, well, this is, they really do think this through before purveying that information. For example, early on, there was a lot of chat about per capita stats with this, and of course John broke this down into, and then the team broke this down into exactly why they did this, and did explain the videos. So again, these are the different ways of purveying and nudging people in the right direction to make sure that the information you're trying to show is easy, consistent, and simple to follow. So what are the other modes of nudging? Well, look, this is a great image shared by one of my colleagues in Germany, which is fantastic because it sort of talks about framing, and the way we read, especially in the West, is top to bottom, left to right. But really, we're actually the call to action is we start here, move there, and then read this at the end, right? So it's quite interesting about how size, perception, color, all these different aspects really do help to zone in on what we're doing. And this can then be easily translated into visualization because we can use these little tricks of the trade to make calls to action to the most important things we see. Now, this is obviously a way of doing this, but there's no substitute from just speaking to people, right? So actually reaching out and speaking to your colleagues, the people that are using visualizations, to understand what are they doing, what the key questions they're trying to answer. And this sort of research really does help to find out when you're designing something, is it for just designing, say, or like this is the old report, leave it as it is, or do you take the report to someone that uses it often, or a group of people that use it often, and be like, right, when this is sent to you, what do you look out for? What are the questions that you have in your mind that you're trying to answer? And that way, you can almost start nudging that information to be transferred quicker and more easily, and also give them the flexibility that they might be looking for in the standard visualization or report that they are looking at. So understanding the purpose, asking the what, the why, and the who. Who's the actual end user? Why are they using this in particular? What is the information they're trying to get out of it? And what is the purpose of the visualization? I think as human beings, we're always looking for that purpose side of things, especially, given that we're so driven towards, why are we on here? Why are we doing these things? We don't want those robotic remedial tasks. We really want to be working towards something greater and bigger. So understanding the what, why, and who, understanding the purpose, and also understanding the end user really does help to move things in the right direction. So just before I finish up, let's not forget just basic data viz principles. Like there is no substitute for the key sort of areas we look at, which is being effective in your use of color, being effective in use of shape, and being effective in the annotation layer and the labels you put on top of your charts. There is, of course, there's a wave of stuff you can look into, like the data-ink ratio by Edward Tufte, work from Stephen Few to understand exactly what is the most important thing that piece of information you're trying to communicate. But really thinking about all of these things, color, shape, annotations, integrating different parts into your visualizations, really feed into this small, the little of data viz, the nudges that we're making in order to help the brain get to the insight as fast as possible. Because ultimately that's why we do this, right? We want to be able to communicate data in an effective way where we're not actually changing the sort of information portrayed, but we're making it easier and more accessible for people to actually get the information they're looking for. So I just want to finish off with these two sort of final thoughts. This is obviously an iterative process. This will always depend on the industry you're working with and the people you're working with. Always look to learn and iterate. Always look to build and design with purpose. And I think through this process, you can also start to educate people along the way in the way that you yourself or your organization is trying to use data visualization to its greatest effect. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for attending this afternoon. And yeah, I'm open for any questions.
Oh, I'm trying to come back in. There we go. Hello. So there is some questions in the Q&A. We have 3. We've got enough time to go through them all. So
sure.
Also, you can upvote questions. So those that are just listening, if you go to the Q&A, you can hit the arrow upwards, and then that'll sort of judge the questions that we should ask first. So there is a question there saying, do you have any references for RAG colors for colorblind people?
Yeah, good, really good question. So Tableau have this fantastic resource, which is, in my opinion, really underused. So research.tableau.com. There we go. So on this site, they've got a bunch of people that they have on staff who literally their job is to find out what's going on in the world of academia. And this lady, Maureen Stone, with the purple in her hair, is actually an expert on color theory. And she's written plenty of papers about exactly how to understand colors and the use of color. And there's talks of them in Tableau conference as well. So do check out the work done by Maureen Stone. Let me just quickly find her again. So she's disappeared. That's strange. View all people. That's what I want to look for. So Maureen's done amazing work in the field of color. and perception. Now, in terms of exactly a RAG status, I think there are a bunch of color palettes within Tableau itself that are colorblind friendly. And there's also, you can probably find this in a bunch of places. There's a bunch of online resources, like I think Coolers is one, coolers.co. I think Coolers is what it's called, which give you a couple of color palettes. And then finally, I'd also recommend getting an extension to your browser that does like colorblind overlays. So colorblind overlay extension. There's a bunch on the market to help you understand how your web page or your visualization will look to someone that is colorblind as well. So I think here we are. So here's an extension here, and you can sort of choose the different types of color blindness, which you can sort of make sure that you're getting that. I personally, when I'm trying to build something that is colorblind friendly, default to the Tableau ones, because I think the blue orange does work well in terms of blue white orange. I think it is works well in terms of that spectrum. However, there are a bunch of other color palettes out there. I think, yeah, Google is your friend in this case as well. I've just realized I've got this other bit I wanted to talk about, which is eye tracking. So there's been a bunch of studies done about exactly how we interact with visualizations, and I would definitely recommend this as well to have a look at exactly how to effectively design based on how we look at things. This is where we come back to that perception thing I was talking about you'll read this first and this second. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Next question. I've been told not to use pie charts in data visualizations. What are your thoughts of how I can sell the benefits of them?
Yeah, so this is the classic it depends, right? So pie charts are great in terms of being accessible and easy to understand. What they're not good at is if you're trying to show a comparison. If you're trying to say this is the biggest, but compared to 1, 2, and 3, that's not what it should be about. I think the best use of a pie chart is almost like this is the biggest proportion. That's all the only thing I want you to care about in this viz. So it's vizzing with purpose that you're really interested in than anything else. I also think that the only thing worse than a pie chart is a pie chart with multiple sections and it's unsorted. The other thing that's worse than pie chart is just a color wheel of stuff. I think, again, like I said, if there's something that's the highest of a proportion, that's the best use of a pie chart. And if that's being used as either a visual cue or to make a point, that's where it's most useful. I am 100% in the camp that pie chart should be used, not used liberally and for use everything. But I think they do have a purpose, and they're not just get rid of them forever. 3D pie charts, get rid of them forever, and exploding pie charts, get rid of them. But pie charts themselves as a concept, bubble charts, and all these things that are like the big no-nos, I think do have purpose as long as they're used correctly.
Cool. Thanks, Ravi. 2 more questions. First one, can you recommend any guidance on building a single dashboard using 6 different worksheets? Am I better changing the dashboard using parameters or add all 6 visuals to a single dashboard?
I'm going to use the classic it depends, right? I think this is where the final point I was making comes in, right? So think about the purpose of building the dashboard you're actually building and exactly what each chart is bringing to the table. When I was in the data school, and Lorna's probably the same, what Andy Kruger used to tell us is how much can you take away from this dashboard and still answer the key questions you're trying to answer? Because personally, I'm a massive fan of one chart dashboards. Like there are certain things, if you've followed me for a while on Twitter or anything like that, or have heard me speak about anything, there are certain things I like. I don't like long form as much, but I like one chart dashboards and things like this because it really limits you, right? Because this whole scarcity thing comes in. Having 6 or 7 worksheets, I think makes sense, but I think you can use size and also containers to sort of show and hide things based on where they're relevant, right? So you now got the great show hide containers you can use in Tableau. So you can almost have, this is my biggest one that I want to swap with a parameter. These are my key ones. And then here are 3 optional charts and you could look into. Or you can just have them all the way. You've got 1 or 2 that are like the larger charts and then 4 smaller charts on one side or something like that. Think about the design, but ultimately I think speak to the end users. Like the best people to speak to are the people that actually can use your report, use your dashboard to actually get the information out. Because if they're not understanding what you're trying to do, in the nicest possible way, you probably just start again, because designing with the audience in mind, the purpose in mind, and the questions that people are trying to answer from what you're building in mind, that's the best way to approach that sort of problem, in my opinion.
Cool, thank you. And last question. However, I'm not sure you're going to be able to answer this in the time, but we'll see what we can do. If not, you can go and jump on a table with him in the end.
Sure.
Thought you explained the nudge side of things really well. That seems like a push from the creator side. How important is that versus the pull side from users on topics like data literacy?
Yeah, of course. I think the concept of nudge is basically to help people along the way towards data literacy and viz literacy. I think in particular, like data literacy is one aspect of it, and I always talk about viz literacy as another, which feeds into this tacit knowledge. Like, does everyone know how to read a parallel coordinates chart? No, but everyone knows how to read a pie chart, bubble chart, and a bar chart. Yes, everyone should be thinking about how do you educate the end user, but there are different ways of doing this. You can do it through lectures, you can do it through exercises, you can do it through just putting stuff in front of them. But ultimately, you will have to have people getting on board. I think the easiest way to do that is do it in a way that they don't realize they're being educated in this way. That because everyone's focus is to do their job better. So why not use this I want to do my job better as a vessel for let me help you understand how I can help you do your job better. Without forcing data and visualization on them.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Ravi. Great to have you here virtually, of course. And it was a great presentation. So with that in mind, round of applause. So virtual round of applause. I'm clapping.
I'll clap myself because I'm in the room. I'll be around for the rest of the session, so find me on some tables. I'll go sit in the corner and see if people want to join me.
Thank you very much. So I am now going to bring Jenny Martin to the stage, and she is going to be talking about Tableau Prep. So just a second, just so I've got everybody's attention, in the chat, could you please tell me if you are using Tableau Prep or if you're using another version of a data prep tool? So either Tableau Prep or other. That would be great if you could just put in the chat. Prep. Woo. Woo. Other. Boo. No, I'm joking, John. Alteryx, Prep, and others. Cool. Yep. Brilliant. Okay. Well, Jenny, are you ready?
Yep. Let me get started with sharing my screen. Sorry, I haven't done this yet on Remo, so
fine.
There we go. Yeah, and then go there. Can everyone see that?
Yep, we can see PowerPoint. Perfect. So I'm going to turn my camera and mic off.
Cool. So thanks for inviting me to speak here today. I am not from the Northwest. I am from Essex, down in Southend at the moment. But it's nice to be up in the Northwest virtually. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about Tableau Prep, as Lorna said, and how it's a great software for being able to clean your data in just a few clicks. You don't even need to be able to write calculations, which can seem daunting initially when you're first starting off with data prep. So I think it's great software. So I'll be going through a little bit about why self-service data prep is important, just like self-service data visualization. That's kind of something that we're all passionate about, being a Tableau user group. This talk is kind of based off of a blog that Carl Alchin and Jonathan Allenby wrote sometime last year. It's on Tableau's website, but I'll show you a link to it later. And you may recognize those names if you've heard of Prep and Data, which is a weekly challenge that is set. So you get your input data and you've got to follow a series of logical steps to get it to your output data. And for me, I love that kind of problem solving nature of data preparation, and it's some of the most fun, I think, of the journey from data to visualization is all the prep and all the logical steps you need to take. So once I've sort of talked a little bit about that, get right into an example, right? So show you an example of how Tableau Prep can clean up your data in just a few clicks. So as we're all data viz fans, then rather than telling you about these things, I think it's easier to show you. So classically, self-service data prep might look a little bit like this. So depending on your background, you might have a number of reactions to seeing something like this. You might think, ugh, code, I don't know what that is. You might think, okay, I know enough to know that that looks like a SQL query. If you ask me to aggregate it to the month level, I might struggle, but I get there eventually. Or you might think that that's perfectly something you're comfortable with. But just this kind of broad range of reactions shows that, you know, this is possibly not the way to go with self-service data prep. There's an obstacle of having to learn, you know, a whole language in order to be able to prepare your data for yourself. And there's also the other obstacle that usually, if you're communicating with a database, you need all sorts of, you know, access, and maybe the analyst doesn't have the access to be able to query the database directly. Maybe they get extracts from IT every month to do their report that they have to manually clean in Excel. That's a form of data prep, any form of, you know, copying and pasting and deleting rows, deleting columns, all very manual, not very documented what someone's doing each time they have to do it. And that knowledge can get lost because you can't see the steps of what's going on. So what's a better way to do that? Well, Tableau Prep, of course. Like Ravi was saying, we all kind of have this kind of intuition where we'll read sort of from left to right in the West. So immediately, without even knowing anything about the software, you can kind of guess that your data is going to come in somewhere over here, have a series of steps applied to it, and go out over on the right-hand side. So you can see the journey that your data is taking. And even in the default, Tableau Prep is telling us quite a lot about what's going on. So we can see here that we've got an aggregation step, for example. That's probably where we would go about aggregating our data to that monthly level. And the other cool thing about Tableau Prep is that it gives you little recommendations as to how you might go about cleaning your data. So that's super useful too. So just to summarize that, why is our self-service data prep so important? It's all about empowering the analyst and taking away from those robotic, manual, boring tasks, and making sure that you've got time to do all the fun things, all the fun visualization that you want to, thinking more about your design elements, making it repeatable. And it's important for all those reasons. It's often where I find myself that I get to know my data a lot better, and so I can spot mistakes and errors that I might need to go back to the database team and talk to them about. And that's always a lot easier to do before you're sort of presenting your final dashboard to someone and they notice the error instead. So that's why I think self-service data prep is great. And if you're thinking that I've convinced you already, then you might be thinking, how can I practice my Tableau Prep? And that's where Prep and Data comes in. So I mentioned there Carl Orchin and Jonathan Allenby. They were the ones who started Prep and Data last year. And then Tom and I joined the team this year. And again, rather than tell you about it, let's show you the website. It's this here. And here is the Prep and Data website. So there's lots of things on here. There's a whole bunch of how-tos that Carl's written, which are great to get started. And then all about the challenges. We've got a nice challenge tracker that it would be great if you're tempted to get involved with. You can see all of your progress over time. If I just click on myself, for example, you'll see how lazy I was in winter last year. But then all the challenges are listed here as well. And we're going to be looking today at Netflix usage during lockdown. So I took a survey of my colleagues at the Information Lab of what they've been watching on Netflix during lockdown. And anyone who's played with survey data before will know how it's usually quite messy. I definitely left them some free text boxes to play with, and they didn't let me down. So we got some nice messy data to play with.
Hey Jenny, just a second. We have
Yeah.
an issue saying that someone can't see your screen. and
Okay.
just making sure that other people can see the screen before we carry on to going into Tableau Prep.
Okay.
Can people just confirm that they can see the screen?
I can see it.
Perfect. Sumitra, you might need to leave Remo and come back in, and then you should be able to get the screens as well. If you're using Safari, it is a little bit sketchy on there, so potentially try and use Chrome. Oh, perfect. So it's working now, so I will leave you to it. Thanks, Jenny.
No worries. Okay. So that's a great point to take it into Tableau Prep. Anyway, let's go there. So we're bringing in our data, and this is our survey data, wherever it is. There, it's decided to go down there. And if we just add in a clean step, then we can take a look at that data. So if we were loading into Tableau Desktop, you might be sort of familiar with it just kind of looking like this, where we've got our column headers and just our rows worth of data. We can see the different questions from the survey, talking about people's names and how they're watching Netflix, what they're watching, ratings, etc. We can see the kind of metadata that we get in Tableau Desktop as well. But the way that Tableau Prep is a lot more neat, basically, is that you get a profile pane as well for all your data. And this is really useful because if we look, for example, at the name column, then we would expect there to be one row for each person who completed the survey, because that would make sense. But if we kind of are looking down with our eyes, then we can immediately see that this row here this person here seems to have 2 rows associated with them. And we can click that to just kind of filter down here and see that Timmy has filled in the survey twice on 2 separate days and has the exact same information in both days. So it's not even like she added new information. It's just duplicated rows, which obviously if we were trying to do some kind of analysis might interfere, basically. So how can we get rid of that? That's our first challenge that we might want to do. So basically what we're going to want to do is filter our data so that we only have 1 row for each person, say the first time they completed the survey. And that's starting to sound a little bit like an LOD if we were in Tableau Desktop, right? So the good news is that as of 2020, Tableau Prep can also do LODs. So if we come down to creating a calculated field, then we can do a fixed LOD. And we can see that since we've done it on our date time column, and we're not grouping by anything at the moment, we're just bringing back the absolute minimum date. So the first time that someone filled in a survey. And you can see sort of the range of our data that we have here, which is a really neat kind of visual way to see what's going on with our LODs. You know, I can change this to a max and we can see that it switches to the other far end of our data. But we are wanting to look at the min and we're wanting to group it by our names. So the people. And we can see that for most of them, we have only one record per person, and that's fine. But then we come down to Timmy, and we can see that we're taking her first response rather than her second response. So that's a really neat way that Tableau Prep visualizes LODs. So I'm just going to call this first response to rename it. And then we can now see that when we click on Timmy, then it just highlights the 1 row in our first response. So now we're going to want to just be able to filter that row out. So for this bit of the challenge, actually, I didn't actually tell you what we're trying to do overall. So we're just going to be looking at the first part of the challenge where we're going to look at the different devices and we're going to see how many people have been using each device. So that means we're not actually going to be using any of our fields that are to do with the shows or the ratings. So I'm just going to highlight over these 4 fields that we're going to need and just keep only those fields from now on. I probably should have done that in the previous step. Don't worry, we'll work it out. So I'm just going to aggregate here on our first response and our person. So just group by that so that we get our 12 rows taken down to 11 so that we're able to filter out that additional row that's duplicated data. So if we just join that back onto here, then we're going to join on our name, and as well we're going to make sure that our timestamp here is equal to our first response here, so that now we can see that that 1 row that's being excluded is that duplicated row from Timmy. And that's good because we only want to have these 11 rows coming forwards through the rest of our data prep. So I'm just going to do that again. We don't actually need our time fields anymore, so now we only need our names and our devices, so I'll just keep only those fields. There we go. That's much neater and easier to see what we're doing here. So if we have a look now at our values that we've got for how have you been watching Netflix, we can see that the issues are coming in with our free text box that we had in our survey. So we can see that some people have been sensible, but other people have not. And for example, some of the issues that we have, we can deal with because, for example, here we've got commas between each of our different devices. So much like we would do in Tableau Desktop, we can also split our values here and tell Tableau Prep exactly how we want to split them. So we're going to want to split on a comma, take all the values, and then that creates this for us. We can see over here as well all the changes. So anything that we do is completely reversible, and there's no fear that anything that we're doing to our data is changing our original input data because that's still exactly the same. So we can see that by doing our split here, we get all of those split new columns written as calculated fields or generated as calculated fields. So we could edit that if we wanted to. Not that we do for this part of the challenge, but if we have a look at our third column here, we actually see that we've only got the word etc. and some blanks, and that's not very useful. So we can just delete this here without having to go back and change our calculation before. So that change is now gone and we're left with what we want basically. The other thing that we might want to do here, we've got TV and iPad as well, submitted by our very own Lorna. So we want to split those up in a similar way on the and sign. So we'll just say all of those fields as well. And now we can get rid of the two fields that we split on before because we've got all of that information split out now. And then we might want to reshape our data so that we've got all of our devices in one column. So we'll use a pivot step there. Doing our columns to rows, and the wildcard pivot is so good. I only discovered it back in January and it blew my mind because we can see that all of our columns that we want to pivot start with the word how. So we write how, tell it starts with, and it brings them all through. And this is great because it means that if we had a respondent who'd had 4 different devices in their list, then we'd have had 4 columns that we need to pivot. And this would automatically bring them through or dynamically bring them through rather than it being a manual process of dragging the columns that we want to pivot. So that's really cool too. We don't need this column anymore though because it's not giving us any useful information, so we can get rid of that. And we can also exclude all these blanks where we just had people who had only entered 1 device rather than 3. So we'll call this devices and think about how we can continue this cleaning process. Now, we can see that we've got some sensible things in there, as we were discussing earlier, but we've got some very unsensible things too. So how do we go about cleaning that? One way that we can do that is to bring in some other data, basically, that gives us a list of approved device names. So if we are to join that on to our data over here, then we can see something that always makes me happy is that we've got a blue stream of data here, we've got a yellow stream of data here, and it makes a nice green join, which is just pleasing. And we can see that where we had 13 rows here, then we've got 4 of them being excluded, but 9 of them are joining up okay. So that's nice. We've got these 9 coming through. How do we get to these 4 devices? These 4, if we click on them, we can see they're the kind of sillier answers that aren't very helpful to us. What we want to do is group all these into a device type of other. So how do we get to them? Well, basically, if we join them together, and then we can change the join type here, where it was an inner before, which we can see visualized up there, like a Venn diagram where they intersect, but we want everywhere where they don't intersect. So it's as easy as clicking on the little Venn diagram here to change that. And then for our device here, rather than calling it null, we can just rename it to be other, which is super fun. So then that's our 4 rows there. our 9 rows here, we can then just union these back together. Where we were joining before, and joining makes our data wider, adds on columns. Our unioning just stacks our data back together. And we can see that all of our columns are lining up well because they've got this kind of green and pink there to show that where the data is coming from and which columns are being stacked on top of each other. So we no longer need our devices, our like messy devices column, and our table names, so we can remove those. And then to answer that question of how many people are watching by each device type, all we need to do is group by our device type and count that name there, and we get our output that we were trying to get to from the challenge. Now there is another part of this challenge where you can go through and get more of a look into the different shows that people are watching and the ratings, but I will leave that to anyone who is interested in completing it. And I will just quickly flip back to here and show you those resources that I was mentioning about Carl and Jonathan's blog, the Prep and Data website, and a link to all the similar challenges, which are great places to start if you're looking for some data prep challenges. It's a really good idea to get involved with the Prep and Data because obviously it's all kind of anonymized data or fake data. So if you get stuck at any point, you can easily reach out over Twitter, over the Tableau forums, and get help, rather than when you're working with data in your day-to-day job. It's always more difficult because it's confidential. So that's definitely a couple of reasons to get involved with Tableau Prep. And thank you for listening. I will stop sharing my screen if I can work out how to do that. Lovely.
Great job, Jenny. I really like seeing Tableau Prep in action. Just on that, I think Carl has launched a Tableau Prep book. Am I right?
He has. That's a very good point. He's all those how-to posts. He's kind of been consolidating those, adding more detail to, and turning into a book, which is going to be out very soon, I think. It's already on Amazon. I can find a link to it, I think, but I can, if anyone's interested in that, happy to talk more about that.
Cool. Perfect. There is one question in the Q&A. It says, can Tableau Prep be automated easily? So if I'm processing monthly data, I could just click a button and it would prep the data and auto-populate a fixed Tableau report.
Absolutely, yep. You can have sort of like a wildcard input that's going to take anything that you've dropped into that folder for all the months datas that you would have, and then schedule that flow to run monthly. It can publish straight to Tableau server. If the data source is on Tableau server, then the report would update as well.
You mentioned schedule. Now, is there an extra cost in that involved? Just so people are aware.
Yeah. Tableau Prep Conductor, you need to be able to schedule it, but otherwise you can manually go in and rerun the workflow as well.
Okay, perfect. And last question here was, can Prep do any of the soft tasks yet, like organizing fields into folders?
Is that, do you mean for Tableau Desktop, like where fields go into folders, or?
I think so. So like when you're in Tableau Desktop, you can add them into folders. Can it add that into the structure of the output?
Not that I'm aware of, but that's really cool, and something I might have to look into, because it sounds more like that would be editing XML and stuff of a Tableau workbook. But
yeah, I just to off the back of that one, I think Hypers may have took that out in terms of adding that into like a TDSX. I know TDEs used to be able to store it, but I'm not sure if Hypers do anymore. But yeah, we can try and get some more answers to that question. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Jenny. Round of applause for Jenny. Yay.
Hi, everybody.
You are live.
Hi, everybody. Just to say, I've got 3 challenges today. The working from home challenge are mounting up today. So one, the intranet. Normally my Wi-Fi is pretty good. Now I'm streaming from my phone. Hopefully that it will stay live. And then the other 2 challenges was there was a wasp in my room earlier, and I was getting rather worried that might interrupt the presentation. And then I've got 2 kids downstairs, one's 3 years old, hasn't worked out that I'm actually in the building. So I'm just hoping we don't have an interruption. Work life, working from home challenges. So I wanted to talk about, I suppose, what it's been like in the NHS during the last couple of months and how it's impacted on NHS data people. I obviously can't talk for every data person in the NHS. I can only really talk about my experience and my trust and anyone that I've kind of talked to recently who also has a similar job. But just to set the scene, if I can change my slide. So I work for Pennine Care NHS Foundation Trust, which is, I'll hide that little button there, which is a mental health, specialist mental health and learning disabilities trust. We have 3,500 staff, and as you can see, we cover 5 boroughs across the east of Manchester: Bury, HMR, Oldham, Thameston and Glossop and Stockport. So quite a big patch to cover. And we deliver for mental health and learning disabilities. We've got some inpatients units across all the 5 areas, ranging in different levels of mental health acuity, plus outpatients, and with the majority of our services delivered in the community. This, as you can imagine, provides a slightly different challenge during the COVID-19. Most of the coverage on the news has been focused on acutes and how acute trusts and how they supporting COVID-19 patients in different hospitals that you'll all be really familiar with. But barely do we talk about the other types of NHS trusts that are in the NHS, one of which is ours. And our response would be slightly different to the general, because most of our patients we are treating are for mental health, not necessarily physical, but we've had to kind of adapt to do a bit of both over the last couple of months. So that's Pennine Care. I suppose one of the biggest shifts we've seen in the NHS in the last 2 months is our need to quickly ramp up technology to meet the needs of the pandemic. So 2 months ago, I think overnight our kind of priorities shifted, and suddenly all the things that we were doing in February were not critical as they were before, and suddenly we had a new priority that we all had to kind of jump to. One of the biggest things was around turnaround time. So our rapid deployment was massively expected. Overnight, we were expected to report daily on a number of different things, both internally and nationally, to keep in chat, I suppose, keep an eye on the situation. That was from a patient point of view in terms of impacts of COVID on patients, but also the impact of staff. So we needed to be able to report from this overnight. And some of this stuff we've never had to collect, never mind report on before. So that produced some massive challenges. As we're not a physical health organisation, we wouldn't necessarily be collecting diagnoses about people's physical health. So we had nowhere to put the fact that patients were had COVID symptoms or a COVID diagnosis. And also there was lots of information about staff that we needed to understand. So there's a big gap in electronic systems for us to be able to do this. So as you can imagine, as soon as things kind of started to occur, we'd implemented Gold Command, which is our kind of emergency response to anything of this nature. And quickly we had to start collecting it within a matter of hours. So you can imagine we had whiteboards and spreadsheets quickly sprung up to be able to collect information for over 200 teams across the trust, all in different locations. But within 48 hours, luckily, I also manage kind of bespoke system development using SharePoint. So we threw together a collection system to collect staff and patient information with all the information we need to collect about patients so that we can start doing situation reports. So we basically we built some systems in SharePoint. We managed to feed that through to our data warehouse and through to Tableau. So within 48 hours, we built a system, got it flowing through the warehouse, and built some dashboards that were available for all our operational and corporate managers so that they could manage the situation in each of their areas. And also there was data available to submit nationally. There's a number of other systems we had to pull on for national reporting, but this was kind of a quick deployment. This 48 hours is a pretty big is a pretty fast turnaround. Normally these kind of things take weeks, not necessarily to develop, but to get agreed to get the go-ahead, to get people engaged and all that, but we didn't have that kind of luxury of time. It was something that had to happen. The other, I suppose, difference during COVID times is I've had to report 7 days a week. Normally our information department, my team work 5 days a week, standard hours, and we only do submissions Monday to Friday to any national teams or internal. And we do have live dashboards that can be used 7 days a week, but we're not required to work 7 days. What we've had to start reporting nationally 7 days a week, and unfortunately some of our systems that we need data out of aren't automated to allow that to happen without us being there. So we've had to have staff logging on briefly to make these submissions and provide data to people to make sure everyone knows what's going on. I presume this is pretty similar in our acute trusts that will, obviously you will have seen all the data coming out of them. Again, this is something that we don't normally do. So yeah, 7 days a week working. The technical expectation has been pretty phenomenal. It normally takes weeks, months, years to kind of develop and put some of the systems in place that we normally have to support staff. And there's lots of governance processes that we normally have to go through, lots of decision making, testing, deployment challenges, engagement. But within a matter of a week, we had deployed additional laptops and devices to enable a third of staff to work from home. This is both clinical and from a support service point of view. This is massively unprecedented. So our network has been challenged beyond all recognition. A lot of these staff have never had to use laptops and never had to work from home before. So I'd say we have a handful of staff normally, or a number of staff that work in community, but they don't all have laptops. Generally, they have access to offices where they will use technology in them bases. So within a matter of weeks, we've managed to deploy to a third of the staff to enable them to work from home for whatever reason, and to minimise the need to be on office-based. The remaining of our staff continue to work on site in inpatients. We have to protect them in a different way, but obviously not everyone can work from home. So that's been pretty phenomenal. Our IT departments in our trust, and I presume every other NHS trust, have probably been one of the most critical and the most busiest services that we've probably seen in the NHS at the moment, just in terms of the way they've had to deliver everything and been a massive support. So a massive clap should be going out to them as much as everybody else. So that's just a few of the examples that kind of shifted during the last couple of weeks, or the last couple of months, I should say. I'm a massive believer, and I'm always going on about being a data-driven organisation and making sure we're all using data to drive decision-making and making sure we make the best evidence-based decisions to basically ensure we're delivering safe and effective services in our trust and generally in the NHS. It's really key, and I think our need for data right now is absolutely critical. You will have seen that there's data flying all over the place around COVID-19. Making sure that's used in the right way to make the right decision is absolutely vital, and it has been in Pennine Care too. So there's been a number of things where we've needed to pull on systems and Tableau. So one of the biggest challenges is staffing. So the one thing that people generally don't talk about is the impact of staffing. So we have minimal inpatients, so we've not had many patients. Has been a number of patients that have had COVID, but we don't, I suppose, deal with it in the same way other trusts do. So we've had to adapt the way we deliver services, but we've also had to consider the capacity within our staff. So a number of staff, as I've said, might be shielding or have symptoms. So suddenly we had a massive drop in our staffing levels. So certain services had a reduced staff model, and we needed to find a way of kind of moving staff around. We've also had new services pop up as we paused some services or had to deliver service a different way. We've also had to up different deliveries of things. So we've had to implement a new kind of helpline to support our mental health clients. We've got staff redeployed in different teams to be able to allow to meet the capacity of the demand. So we've had to build some extra systems to help us work out how to do a skills match. So we moved one member of staff from one place to another. So staff redeployment has been a massive challenge. So we've basically been collecting through our daily situation reports whether any teams have any staff available. And then if they do have staff available, they need to tell us when they're available and what sort of skills they've got. So we've built a number of systems where we've linked them together, and we've linked them together through Tableau. So we know where people are available, and we know what type of skills they've got, and we've linked them two together. And our internal kind of transfer staff scheme that we've called it now uses Tableau to work out where someone's got a gap and how it's going to be filled, and having lots of conversations. So we've got a bit of a match.com going on. So that's been really important. And again, seeing the use of Tableau come into its own in that point of view. So that's helping to drive the system. Something that we're, again, you will know there's lots of discussions about PPE, personal protection equipment, in the NHS, and making sure you have enough stock to support our staff on the front line. So again, as the volumes of this need to be monitored, we also need to make sure we've got the right levels of stock in the right areas, and we also know how much we're using. This is slightly different in mental health and in our different services in terms of working out how much we need. So we've had, again, built a collection system to do a bit of a stock take every few days around our PPE level. And then I've been kindly helped by Interworks to develop a consumption dashboard using Tableau, trying to calculate how much stock's being used, what type of items being used, and where and when, so that we can kind of predict how much we're going to need over the coming weeks and making sure we're safely stocked. So that's something we don't normally do in our trust, and we definitely have never got involved in kind of stock management. So it's been really interesting, but been a bit of a challenge from a data point of view. So we've had a bit of help. We've done a lot of capacity and demand. Looking at, again, obviously we've got less staff on available because some staff aren't available to deliver service in the same way, or we've got staff off sick. So we've done lots of reports, look at the activity levels in our services and where we need to meet different demand, and kind of modelling the differences compared to this time last year. So we've done loads of capacity and demand modelling to enable our service to understand the kind of throughput and to make sure we can meet the demand as it kind of changes, especially as it's fluctuating obviously quite significantly over the last few weeks. And we need to make sure we meet that demand and predict where it's coming from. So we've done quite a lot of capacity and demand as well. So these are just a few examples of some of the stuff we've done. We've done lots of other stuff. There's been lots of other submissions about different areas of the trust and different things going on. And I suppose we've done a lot around situation reporting and looking at what's been happening over the last 2 months and how we've kind of had to change the way that we pretty much do everything. But now we're looking at how we're going to plan for the future. The government are talking about how they're going to ease lockdown and planning and what that might look like. So we need to plan as well in terms of what the impact is going to be on our services. Only today I've been talking about workforce modelling. Over the coming weeks, months, year, potentially, there could be a change in our capacity depending on a number of factors. So as we increase the testing, there might be more staff off that haven't just got symptoms, but they've been tested for COVID, so that there might be an increase in absence. Also, as we are short on staff in certain areas, there's a lot of people not taking the annual leave as they normally would. So there could be a point when they need to start taking that leave, and that might fall at a similar time. So in the second half of the year, when we have to use up our leave by March, we could see a lot more people requesting annual leave. And how do we work out how many staff we need if we also need to support them to have some downtime? We could see an increase in maternity leave. One of the things that might happen is there could have been lots of babies coming through COVID. So there's just some of the examples that we need to factor in and work out whether we can model how that might look like over the next year. As you will have guessed, with mental health, so there's going to be an increased need for mental health support. We've seen a massive decrease in terms of new referrals into services, but at some point there will be an increase, and what we're trying to do is work out when that's going to happen and how we can manage increase in demand. We need to deliver services in different ways to meet that the support of our population in terms of their mental health, and making sure that we have the right services in place to support a potential increase over the coming months, year, and making sure we're ready for that. So we're trying to do some modelling around what that might look like and which type of services it might hit. Also, unfortunately, we might need to provide more bereavement support, which could affect people's mental health. So again, how do we model that? These are certain areas that we need to think about to support that and different people. So again, we'll be looking at data to plan for that increase. The biggie, one of the biggest for me as well, is in terms of the way that we deliver services and the use of building technology. In the last 2 months, the NHS across the country has adapted the way that it delivers some of its services. So we've quickly had to implement virtual technology, which has been in the making for years, but something that was really difficult for engagement purposes and finding the right technology. But overnight, we've had to find different ways of communicating with our patients, and also providing support service in different ways. So information team, my team are now all working from home, as you can imagine, and maybe that's something we can continue to do. Do we need buildings being used in the same way? So we'll be able to model whether we can actually save some money in the NHS by using less estate and using different technology to deliver the services in the most effective way. So we're doing a lot of modelling to work out how that might look like, and again, relying on data and technology to do that. So that's some of the stuff that we'll be working on over the coming weeks. And again, change the way we deliver services. There is a lot of use of virtual technology and phones and everything that's probably been there for a long time, but something we're now having to do. And we need to work out the benefits versus delivering our services. We do deliver all of our care pretty much. It was face-to-face up until just before COVID hit. So will we continue to deliver services face-to-face in a year's time, or will it look quite different? Do our population need service delivered through technology, or will we continue, or will we go back? So it's trying to work out whether these things work for mental health services and modelling the kind of support we need to do that. So there's so much data we can look like and some really interesting stuff to get involved in terms of looking what the impact is and how we can use data to really help us plan for tomorrow in our organisation. So it's quite an interesting time to work in data in the NHS in terms of looking forward and starting to predict what might be needed, and also trying to be as efficient as possible. We get involved in a lot of kind of financial reporting as well to work out whether there's savings we can make, as we still need to be able to fund our services in the best possible way and be as efficient as possible. So lots of exciting things from a data point of view on the horizon that we're getting involved in. So it's not all kind of situation reporting as of today. We need to kind of plan for the next step. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say today. I didn't give any demos of dashboards or anything. We haven't done anything really shiny, and obviously quite a lot of it's got confidential data in there. I suppose what I've gone with in the dashboards is making sure the dashboards are accessible as possible in terms of making sure our data visualization is really clean and people can access it really well. We didn't have the opportunity to engage with lots of people, and so the dashboard needed to be accessible immediately and people to understand it and user friendly. So we've gone with really simple visualizations, big ass numbers at the top of each of our dashboards to make sure people could see exactly what was going on straight away. But obviously I'm keen if people want to reach out and talk to me a bit more about some of the stuff we've done, then please do. There's been a few conversations on the chat I noticed around the Tableau Healthcare User Group. So I also help to run the Healthcare User Group, and we normally meet every few months in London. But again, we'll be going virtual, and we're just looking at a new date at the beginning of June. So if you want to subscribe to make sure you always find out about the next Healthcare User Group, next user group dates, then there is a hub that you can join through Splash. So this is the website here. So subscribe to that and you'll find out about the next events. But if you want to chat to me anyway, I'm on Twitter. You can email me. I even have a blog, although it's been a bit quiet over the last few months. Been slightly distracted by work, but hoping to get a blog out soon. And thank you for listening. And really important, stay safe. And obviously, as a mental health provider, keep talking. That we keep talking and stay safe.
Cool. Thanks very much, Ella. I really like to talk. There is some questions in the Q&A. You might want to stop sharing your screen to save that bandwidth issue. First question is, what is the licensing model like for the NHS? Is it down to the individual team's trust-based or driven by the Cabinet Office? I don't know if you can answer that question, but if you could, I'd just sort of give a bit of a...
I presume the licensing model for Tableau is the question. I'm guessing. So it's down to individual organisations. So each NHS organisation would have to buy Tableau. So there's not a national Tableau offer. In the Greater Manchester health and social care partnership. They use Tableau, so there has been some sharing of Tableau across organisations. So that's kind of a first in I think pretty much in the country. But Greater Manchester is quite different to every other area of the country because it's a bit of a test bed. So we do have Tableau across the whole of Greater Manchester. Not every trust uses it in Greater Manchester, but it's been used centrally to kind of share information across our commissioners. But yeah, it's generally an organisation's agreement with Tableau. I do think there is, but I can't swear to it, a level of discount for public sector. But as I've only ever worked in the public sector, I can't compare it to what everybody else pays.
Okay, cool.
But it's
Second question. What is the most popular question your team is asked, and how has Tableau helped you answer it?
Oh, what is the most popular question your team? Oh, whatever.
No, obviously during this time and this current situation.
Yeah. I think one of the most critical questions that have come out of the situation reporting is around availability of staff. So we've monitored through the situation reports the number of staff that have been unable to work. So we know at a team level how many staff aren't able to work at the moment, whether they've got symptoms, whether they are shielding and they can't work from home, because there's some staff we can't enable to work from home for whatever reason, depending on what their role is. I suppose that's been one of the most important questions that we've had to support in order for us to be able to support the organisation to redeploy staff to different services to make sure we continue to provide the minimal, most effective service we can. So I think I wouldn't say it's popular, but that I think the staffing stuff has been really critical during this time.
Cool. And then last question, what changes that you have had to put in place recently do you hope you'll be able to keep in the future? And then there's another question that's just gone in, but answer that one first.
So I think generally in the NHS, technology has been engaged with. I mean, I think most companies have found this from, obviously, it's fairly obvious that people have engaged with virtual technology even in their families. But I think in the NHS, the rollout plan for Microsoft Teams, I think, was 2 years as a central kind of rollout and support. And that happened within 2 weeks. So I suppose, and people are now in our organisation meeting in virtual meetings all day long. And this has been really different for our organisations as well as many others. Most people are used to meeting face-to-face, especially in the NHS, because, yeah, it's really difficult sometimes to engage with technology and provide that support. But when you're thrown into it and you have to do that, I would hope that we continue that, and where it works and we're not having staff travel all over the place for meetings will be really great. I think from a data point of view, I think a lot more people have been using Tableau on a daily basis for their situation reports. There probably isn't any other dashboard ever, I would say, that's been used by this many people in our organisation, all focused on one thing. So it's been a good engagement exercise for Tableau. Despite us having it for years, it's still something that people use in different ways. So I think it's been really positive in that way as well. And hopefully we'll continue that engagement going forward.
And then last one, have you found your team working with new teams to meet COVID demands?
Yeah, it's been quite different. We've had, I think, a lot more engagement with our procurement team. We've got a new PPE team set up that's been established in response to COVID. So we're working some people that are in different teams. But yeah, procurement has been one of the areas I've been working with a bit closely. I've been working with a lot closer with kind of our HR colleagues, again, to do with the staffing. I'm trying to think of any others. But I think it's allowed us to kind of engage with more people in different ways. And for us to try and highlight where we can help as well has been really important. One of my biggest takeaways is trying to encourage people to use us when they might not have thought of using us, and really trying to get people on board that we could actually start planning for this ahead of time. So really starting to make use of the information team, not just for reporting the history, is for really kind of engaging with data for planning and modelling what it might look like, because they need us. They can't do it without us.
Cool. Well, thanks, Ella. Round of applause for Ella. Virtual one, obviously. So that is us. I'm just going to bring Colin back to the stage so that we can sign off as a team. if you have any questions for any of us, please feel free to reach out and we'll answer any questions. We have email addresses or Twitter, or you can contact us via the Northwest Tug page. So if I just quickly share my screen, you should be able to see a PowerPoint slide, yes? Someone say yes.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So next,
Yes.
hopefully, the next we'll have another virtual. Well, not hopefully. I'd love the lockdown to be lifted, but however, I don't think having a lot of people in a small space is going to be a priority anytime soon. So another virtual Tableau user group. Hopefully this time works quite well for people. If it doesn't, let us know. We will try and get out like a feedback form just to see how you found this platform, and if you want to move away from it or keep it. And also you can subscribe, and they'll send updates through the usergroups.tableau.com. And yeah, so that is it for us. Let me stop sharing. And yeah, so thank you very much. We'll be staying around on the tables. Again, if you want that NHS chat, there's dedicated tables. If you want a chat or just to leave, that's also cool. But stay safe, stay home, protect the NHS, and goodbye.
Keep talking.
Tableau. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.